Pakistan, and the occasional statements from maybe Turkey, Malaysia, the OIC countries, and maybe random countries from around the world, maybe certain NGOs, there isn't real tangible support the same way that, for example, I don't know, let's take the example of Ukraine, that in the last 2 years, a year or 2 years, we've seen how much international solidarity, how much international support, even arms and munitions have been sent to the Ukraine, how much funding that they've received. For Kashmir, it is non-existent. Just hours before the clock struck midnight on the 5th of August 2019, the Kashmiri Diaspora, people like myself and those living all over the world, were flooded with goodbye messages from friends and relatives living inside Kashmir who sensed something ominous was going to happen to them, courtesy of the Indian government. And then more than 14 weeks of silence. Kashmir was completely cut off from the world, but more importantly, people like me were cut off from our loved ones. The world knew what India had done, because obviously India couldn't control the internet shutdowns everywhere else in the world. Yet those India had done it to had no idea due to the blanket ban on media and communications. And while the world talks of 5G, space exploration, self-driving cars and advancements in innovations, India yet again threw Kashmir back into the Stone Ages, facing the longest media blackout and internet shutdown in history. And as we sit here, we still don't know the full extent of what's happened in the last 4 years in Indian-occupied Kashmir. With the additional Indian military forces sent to Kashmir, the total number of armed forces and military personnel is about 1 million, and some argue it's much more than that, which further makes Kashmir the densest military to civilian ratio in the world. It's also worth noting that India sent thousands of buses full of Indian migrants to Kashmir, as well as armed forces in civilian clothing, including intelligence operatives. Public assembly was prohibited, forcing nearly 10 million people to be under self-imposed house arrest or else risk being killed. Last year, with limited information coming out, and the year before that, some reports said more than 30,000 Kashmiris were preemptively arrested, with many being transferred to jails outside of Kashmir because the cells were overflowing with detainees. And in fact, according to The Telegraph, on the 25th of September 2019, they reported 13,000 minors were also subjected to abductions. And there's even evidence of children being kidnapped in the middle of the night and women molested, and those children being kidnapped from their mothers' laps. All pro-freedom politicians were and are still detained, including many religious heads and community leaders. Media banned, mobile communication banned, and then downgraded from 4G to 2G. Most landlines banned, schools shut, businesses closed, causing more than $5 billion lost to economy and infrastructure. All industries suffered severe blows, pushing the majority into loan defaults or even closure, with hundreds of thousands losing their livelihoods. Food, water, and medicine were running out. Free movement was completely restricted, to the extent a young woman gave birth to a stillborn child because she was prevented from reaching the hospital. Funeral processions banned. Death certificates banned. There were reports of people burying their loved ones in the back garden. The injured, mostly by pellets but including bullets, were arrested, and if they went to hospital, even if they got into hospital, they were arrested as well. Now, we could go on to talk about the healthcare, which was severely restricted by curfew and military roadblocks. We could talk about schools and universities shut down, gravely impairing the education and adding to the trauma of children and their parents. But it's also important to understand the local and regional media lost whatever little independence they had left, forcing them to become mouthpieces of the BJP government or entirely, completely close up shop. Kashmiris living abroad found out months later of family events. One young man learnt that his fiancée died 16 weeks after it happened. And a son who hadn't seen or spoken to his mother in months watched a news channel, and by accident she had passed by that interview and he saw a glimpse of her while the reporter was doing an interview with somebody else. Then there were the digital deaths, where WhatsApp numbers were suddenly deactivated because of inactivity, leaving friends and family fearful that maybe it represented something more insidious. That was all just the first few months after India illegally and unilaterally annexed Indian-occupied Kashmir. Now, those are just a few months. I can't tell you what's happening over the last 4 years, simply because still we don't have all the information. Just a few days ago, there was a report, not from Kashmiris or Pakistanis, these are Indian, the Indian Minister for Indian State Home Minister. He said that 11,000 women, females, have gone missing over the last 4 years, of which more than 1,000 were girls under the ages of 18. So you tell me, how much information can I possibly tell you? Generally speaking, when we talk about international support from global players, it doesn't exist. I mean, it's a very short answer, but it's the truth. Apart from Pakistan and the occasional statements from maybe Turkey, Malaysia, the OIC countries, and maybe random countries from around the world, maybe certain NGOs, there isn't real tangible support the same way that, for example, I don't know, let's take the example of Ukraine, that in the last 2 years, a year or 2 years, we've seen how much international solidarity, how much international support, even arms and munitions have been sent to the Ukraine, how much funding that they've received. For Kashmir, is non-existent. It just doesn't exist. But when we talk about how the diaspora have suffered and what the international community have done for the diaspora, people like myself, like Asif Dar, or anybody else that's living outside, talking about Kashmir, it also doesn't exist. We don't register. We don't seem to be important. The Kashmiri identity doesn't seem to be relevant enough for the international world to take attention, to make some kind of effort to safeguard our lives and our families' lives. Usually I don't talk about personal experiences, but in this case I probably should. The fact that things that I have done or other people in the diaspora have done over the last 3-4 years, our families have had to suffer. They've been picked up, they've been tortured under loudspeaker, my own cousin, under a loudspeaker inside the masjid to instill fear and terror among the population. Inside a masjid, they desecrated that masjid by torturing a young boy in his teenage years. And then they're taken to jail, and members of, not just my family, but other people's families have been murdered just because of the work that we do, just because of the work. And it's not some kind of work that is illegal or criminal. We are simply advocating, lobbying, politically, diplomatically for the resolution of the Kashmir dispute, according to the United Nations Security Council resolutions. It isn't much to ask for. We haven't declared a war. We haven't taken up arms. All we have done is asked for peace, for azadi, the simple necessity that everybody has been granted under the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. So when it comes to the diaspora, even we have suffered, our families have suffered in the diaspora as well as inside Kashmir. Anybody that is connected to us, myself, my family members no longer talk to me because their telephones and their landlines and any form of communication, their social media is completely and utterly monitored. And it's not just them. Everybody's social media is monitored inside Kashmir. You cannot speak about Kashmir without the Indian government's wrath falling upon your heads. To the extent that I would say that even our thoughts are policed, the private spaces inside our homes, on our telephones, communicating with our loved ones, with our friends, even that is policed and that is completely shut down. So when the international community couldn't even help those people living inside Kashmir facing the worst human rights atrocities, the worst human rights apocalypse, a genocide as Gregory Stanton has described, what hope do the people in the diaspora have? When we speak to foreign media and international NGOs and anybody that lives outside of India, when it comes to Kashmir, we always have to show hope. We are Muslims. We have to have tawakkul. So we always have hope. But practically and tangibly speaking, we warned the world about what Narendra Modi represented. It isn't so long ago that he was considered to be the butcher of Gujarat and banned from traveling to the United States. He was on a blacklist because of the genocide that he had performed on the Muslims, the ethnic cleansing that he had committed inside Gujarat. And it's not just the BJP. Let me tell you that the BJP and the Congress are two sides of the same coin. The 3 wars that India waged against Pakistan were not done by the BJP, they were done by the Congress party. So we must remember that the political parties inside Kashmir all are on the same page when it comes to the Kashmir dispute, or for that matter, Pakistan. When Article 370 and 35A was revoked, illegally, it was the Congress party that fought with the BJP to take credit, and they were saying that they had done it bit by bit by bit, and that the BJP government had only hit the final nail in the coffin. The reality is, all of these people are on the same page. And when we talk about what the condition, has it improved or worsened, the condition inside Kashmir only worsens every single day, and you have to remember, it overspills to mainland India. Kashmir has been used as a testing ground, a laboratory experiment. And those trials were then exported to mainland India. Look at the CAA, look at the NRC, look at the Farmers' Bill, look at what is happening with the people that support Khalistan, look at the Naxals, the people of Nagaland, the Maoists, the people in the south, in South India. Look at what is happening with the Muslims, the Christians even, the Dalits, their own Hindus, the minorities. Everybody is suffering inside India, and it reminds me of something that a think tank had said maybe a couple of decades ago. I mean, I still like to consider myself relatively, with information relatively new, but they had said that the union of India is unnatural, and its logical conclusion is if it broke up into smaller parts. Now, whether that happens or not is irrelevant. The point is the direction that India is taking towards its own minorities, and to assume that it will implode is not enough. We cannot wait that long. How many more mothers will you have to see crying for their loved ones? How many more fathers will you have to see being buried in the earth? How many more sons will you have to see banging their fists on the ground in jail cells because they've been tortured? We cannot wait for a natural calamity to happen or for an implosion inside India. The reality is whatever is happening inside Kashmir, and the strength and the resolve that the people of Kashmir have shown for more than 70 years is a source of inspiration for the minorities inside India. What we do is a reflection for them, that they can also do the same. So safeguarding Kashmir will, inshallah, safeguard the Muslims in the subcontinent. I know it sounds drastic, it sounds implausible, and it sounds far-fetched, but ask the Muslims inside India what Kashmir represents for them. Lodging genuine political leadership inside jail, people like Qasim Faktu, Masrat Adam, Asya Andrabi, Shabir Shah, Yasin Malik, or innumerable number of people. The whole point was to crush the Kashmiri spirit, to show the resistance that your leadership is now in jail. But it isn't just the political leadership that has been lodged in jail or under house arrest. Academics, journalists, people that used Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Discord, or whatever social media platform that exists, even they were sent to jail, they were arrested, they were detained. Everything is monitored, and the entire purpose is simply to show so-called normalcy to the rest of the world. Take the G20, for example. They yet again locked up people and put them in jail, put them under house arrest, to make sure that when the G20 summit happened, there were no protests happening inside Kashmir. There was nothing happening on the streets, no stone pelting, no protests, no form of outcry. The whole purpose of the Indian government to suppress the political leadership, to suppress the academics, to suppress the civil society, the media, and just any civilian who wishes to dissent. The entire reason is simply to show fake normalcy to the rest of the world. Sometimes it's strange that they need to do so because they have taken so many extreme measures and nobody cares. I often wonder why they need to take such a small measure of locking up political leadership or even civilians for that matter in jail or put them under house arrest. And remember that it was Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani Saab Shaheed, Ashraf Sahrai Shaheed, and Altaf Shah Saab Shaheed that were martyred, what we consider to be martyrdom, and their murder was performed considered, as we consider, as a custodial murder. They were under detention and died under detention because they were denied healthcare, they were denied bail, and many of the people that are in jails do not have any charges, and there is no recourse to legal means. Look at the case of Yasin Malik. Look at the case of Masrat Alam. Look at the case of Asya Andrabi. Look at any of these cases, and these are big names that you can find in the newspapers. There are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of young people, boys and girls, under the ages of 18 that still languish in jail under no charges or fake charges. It's a good question, but with whom? With whom do we negotiate? With whom do we make a settlement? With those people that are asking, or rather demanding, banging the drums of war before the poll assembly elections happening in December, that they are going to take Azad Kashmir. With whom do we negotiate? There has to be some kind of equality. Pakistan often, there is a joke within the Kashmir community, which I'm sure that the Pakistani public is also well aware of, that when the international community says to India and Pakistan that you must settle this issue, India says it is a bilateral issue, not an international issue. When Pakistan goes to India and says, let us discuss this issue, as you said, it is a bilateral issue, India says it is not a bilateral issue, it is a internal issue. And when the people of Kashmir say, fine, if it's an internal issue, let us discuss it, they say there is no issue. So until India decides to genuinely come to the negotiating table, who are we going to actually negotiate with? What kind of settlement can there possibly be? India have already illegally annexed Indian occupied Kashmir and are now looking towards Azad Kashmir. And it doesn't stop there. Understand what a pan-Hindu nation is. Understand what Akhand Bharat is. Their vision of Akhand Bharat, a pan-Hindu nation, is no different to what Nazi Germany's vision was. And of course, if you look at the literature of the RSS, the parent organization of the BJP, who have many affiliates, they believe in a pan-Hindu nation that goes as far as Saudi Arabia, calling the holy Kaaba in Mecca as Makkeshwar Mahadev Temple. Who are we going to negotiate with?